This is Research as It Happens. I'm Rolf Swan. In the previous episode, we started with a simple question about a well-known finding in psychology. But that question quickly turned into something larger, a project involving dozens of labs across the world. And once you get to that point, the nature of the project changes. We're moving from just designing a study to wondering, how do you do research in such a large group? In this episode, we take a closer look at that shift, along with two collaborators on the project. In the first interview, we talk about big team science, about what happens when research is done at that scale, what makes it possible and what makes it difficult. In the second interview, we talk about what it's like to be inside such a collaboration and about a question that comes up almost immediately in the mind of any researcher. How do you assign credit when many people contribute to a project in different ways? Because once research becomes a collective effort, questions of contribution, responsibility, and recognition become part of the science itself. My first guest is Katja Pronizius. She is a postdoctoral researcher at the University of Vienna, Austria, a collaborator on this project, and a member of the Psychological Science Accelerator, PSA. PSA is a globally distributed network of researchers who seek to leverage team science to address big questions rooted in theory and/or real-world problems. And what's more, Katja recently co-authored a paper called The Advantage of Big Team Science: Lessons Learned from Cognitive Science. I've linked it in the show notes. So Katja, people talk a lot about big team science these days, but how is big team science actually different from small team science?
I would say that it's also a very good question, because at what point can we consider the project to be a big team science initiative or not? So my first question was, when I joined this Psychological Science Accelerator and other initiatives, I said, give me the number. What is the number of collaborators? What is the number where I can say I am part of a big team initiative or not? And someone told me it's not about the numbers, it's about your mindset. So for me, it's more about at what point did my mindset shift into this collaborative way of thinking about my topic and at what time do I start taking different perspectives on the issue. And this, I think, makes a big project up, because it's not anymore about a single project, but about a collaboration of different minds together to kind of see it from different perspectives.
You're saying, okay, so I changed perspective. What specifically changed in your perspective? Less of a focus on the method and details of the original study, or at the same time, more of a focus on other researchers on the team and the organization?
Yeah, this as well. First of all, I was surprised to know that some of my assumptions that I assumed that they would be universal about some phenomenon or something else, or the way how we do research, that it's kind of similar everywhere. But then this was, of course, a naive assumption. And then once we started collaborating with each other, I found out that you can do the same project in so many different ways. And you can even interpret the data even a bit differently, depending on your internal understanding of what you're measuring. And this for me was then a game changer, where I said, wow, there is so much variability in a good way, that I can do science differently, I can think about science differently, and the same term can have a different meaning across disciplines and across different cultures. So being aware of this variability was really very, very interesting and helpful for my personal growth.
Yeah, I can understand that, and also the challenge that lies within, because people mostly think, when they talk about big team science, they think the more labs, the more participants, the better the science. But in your paper, you're basically saying it's not that simple. No. So what is it actually that changes? Is it just in terms of quantity? There are more people involved, or is there also a change in quality?
It is change in quality, of course, but it could be for a better or worse. So you cannot predict this. because you have so many researchers on your team, everyone brings something to the project. What is hard is to align everyone or to merge this expertise in a way that this whole that the final product is larger than the contribution of every single lab, then it works. But if you, as a lead team, you say, no, it's for me just to collect data, that someone does it for me for free or by paying themselves, it's not about this, because then I can hire some other organizations that will collect data for me, and then I get my quantity. But what we want to have a qualitatively better product, but it's not a default, it's not a given. It's only if everyone plays along and try to really work on this goal together.
So if we take this project, we have started several different working teams that work on different aspects of the project, and the idea is for everyone to bring in their expertise in those teams, because like you're saying, I remember being on large projects, and if you lead them, it's a lot of work, and if you're just part of them, sometimes you're not all that involved. So I guess that's what we want to change, bring more people on board in, let's say, with the thinking about the project, so that they feel more ownership.
Yeah, and I think it's incredible because it's really hard to do. At a certain point, the lead team could say, no, it's just too hard. We can't do this, or we cannot facilitate this exchange between different labs because it's a lot of work. But that, I think, is the main then challenge for everyone. How can we do it? How can we make it work that even those who are contributing maybe with data, they still have their saying in this project? And I'm pretty sure that every lab has so much potential and so much expertise. And it would be always beneficial to know who do you have in your project, like you are doing here, and what expertise do they have.
Let's say I want to join a project like this, and I've never been in a big team science project before. What would be the biggest shift for me? So how would my research life change if I became part of a large project?
I think the main first question for you or for this person would be to think about, why do you join this project? Is it for you more about the content because you're interested in what they're starting, then it could be a one-time thing? Do you want to learn new skills? Do you want to network with other people? Do not wait that someone will reach out to you, be proactive, and then this life then would change because you would proactively seek new opportunities, and then they will come. And also for newcomers, I would always say, at least at this psychological science accelerator, and this was very helpful for me, I had a collaborative agreement. So before onboarding, I received this document, and they told me explicitly what is expected of me, and I could make this informed decision. And I think then you can decide for yourself whether it's too much of a burden for you, or would you say, no, it will not conflict with my other tasks that I'm doing, and I can do it as a side project. And that's why I think every big team science project is different. That's why be always aware or ask upfront what is expected of you.
That's good. I don't think we did that in this project, by the way, so that's still something that we might do. I think that's a very good point. In episode 1, we talked about robustness. There's this famous finding, but can it be replicated? And can it be replicated in different labs? And, and we talked even about, can it be replicated with different stimuli, not cars, but scooters and those sorts of things. But to what extent is big science the answer to questions like that?
I think it's also not only could it replicate, but I'm more curious when it doesn't replicate, if it doesn't replicate, to figure out why. Because of course we can say that every culture is different, every country is different, there are similarities, but also the lab culture is different. And if it doesn't replicate, it would be, or if it replicates in some countries but not the others, I think it's really a great foundation, the first step And then the next steps will be the follow-up studies to figure out why we have this result. Can we find the answer? And this is for me the most interesting part, to know where do we differ, where do we show a similar pattern or react similarly. So yeah.
Actually, Massimo said something similar in the previous episode where he said, well, there's basically a range of effect sizes that we might expect. They might vary a lot. And then explaining this variability, that would basically be the next step then.
And I think this is also the benefit, or this is also like a strength of these big team science initiatives, that we are going, that we finally kind of leave our bubble, that we say, okay, let's see how it is elsewhere. And as I said, it's not about the results for me personally. It's more about, okay, now what? What do we do with this results that we received?
Yeah, exactly. Now, we talk about big team science as a good thing, right? It solves all kind of problems, and it's nice to work together. So it sounds very promising. But in your paper, you say, well, okay, that may be true, but it also introduces a whole new set of challenges. And one of them you mentioned is diversity.
Yeah, I always say, at least my personal attitude is I love big team, large scale collaboration. So I'm really biased here. But I also understand that it's a very expensive project, even though many of us are doing this for like without payment, but it's still our time, it's still our energy. And we always need to think about, why do we do this big team science? What do we want? What is the question worth doing this? And because once you started it, you're responsible for a large team. You're responsible for people who who trust you, who believe that you can bring it to the end, and they invest their energy into this. And yes, you are dealing with a group of very diverse people, be it a discipline, be it a cultural diversity, age diversity, also scientific, like where there are senior researchers, young researchers. And the lead team needs to be very flexible. They need to accommodate different ways of communications. They need to be aware that certain tasks could not be done at a certain speed they want it to be done. And I think it's also nice to be forgiving if something doesn't work, because it could be just because due to some misunderstandings or differences in how we do things. And this is hard because you are working with many people who are really incredible. And I think this is something that we need to remember, that yes, it's good. You will meet many international colleagues, but it could be challenging. But it can work, as we see that from so many projects.
Another challenge that you mentioned is motivation. So we're just saying a lot of people do this in their free time. Free time, their research time. They could have done other studies. But a project like this is dependent on the contribution of all these people. So how do you prevent things from stalling?
Yeah, it's very hard to do, because we cannot expect people who said that they would do it in their free time and in their research time. Since we do not pay them, we cannot, of course, expect them to deliver the way we just hope it's they do a favor for us as well. And I think the motivation, for example, with a podcast like this, or that with some events, for example, at Psychological Accelerator, we had workshops. So you create a kind of sense of community. You are not alone just reading your emails coming from someone. You really feel that you're part of community, that you can learn from them, that the community needs your expertise. And then I think that can boost your motivation. But at certain point, if people say they have other tasks and other obligations, then it's something we have to accept.
Yeah. Now, turning back to our project for a moment. So, we're currently at the stage where we're forming these working groups, and I'm on one group that's already quite far along. But what do you think is the biggest risk at this stage, at this early stage of the project?
I think the risk is, of course, the translation. That the mistake in the translation and study design, that if people do not see them, there are so many, we just had it recently, even though you try to check everything for all possible mistakes, sometimes there is still this mistakes in the code or in the translation. And I think this is, for me personally, it's the hardest part where I'm emotionally very stressed, because I know that once the data collection starts, that's it. And for me, this is where everyone should understand or be aware how important their job is. And at the same time, the lead team needs to trust others that they can do their job well. Because as you say, you're part of one group, but not all of them. And you kind of need, of course, you have an overview, but putting trust into people and trust them that they do their job well, it's something that is a bit hard.
But but you're true. But I mean, you're right. But it's necessary, because you can't oversee everything yourself. So yeah, that's a big challenge. And is there any advice you would have based on your own research on this topic before we start the data collection?
I would say still that, of course, micromanagement is not needed, because we are all adults, we're all academics, but still there should be an overview and, of course, structure. Everything should be structured, documented, so that we know what we did 5 years from now. This is also another problem or another issue with big team science projects, that they take time, they take years to finalize. And that's why, it's not with a single project, you hope that maybe in a year you are done and that's it. But here it can take up to 5 years or longer. So it's good when everything is structured, documented, and can be traced back to every single moment in time.
Yeah, that's a good point. It's also, I think, important for just doing a single study.
Yeah.
You might forget the names of variables or why you did something as part of your procedure, but definitely for a large-scale project. And you're definitely right that it's not like we'll have a paper next year. It's a long process for sure. Is there anything else that you wanted to say, that you wanted to add to the discussion? Anything we forgot talking about, or?
Yeah, I would also say maybe another issue is that another problem with big team science collaborations, that we have members from various countries, and sometimes there are conflicts between certain countries, and the lead team should maybe, if they are not aware of all conflicts we have right now, they need to be really aware that it could happen. Then certain labs do not want to collaborate with each other. Then the lead team, before starting the project, need to think about what would they do in such situations. Do they invite everyone? Do they not invite certain countries? Or what is their position or their attitude towards this?
And so I guess there are two issues that are at play there. One is the political situation, and the other one is the individual researcher.
Yeah, for me, it is my personal position is I would invite everyone. I would not exclude anyone. But this is, of course, my personal attitude. And I think the lead team, they need exactly to think about this, and they need to communicate this to everyone who is joining their lab to make it clear what their position is. And do they really hold researchers responsible for what their government is doing? Then if they think this is the case, then it's their choice. But they need to be transparent about this and be then consistent. If they exclude the US, they should exclude other countries as well who are maybe have now ongoing conflicts. And another kind of what they need to think about this as well, which kind of aligns with this topic. Who makes the decisions? Does the lead team make all the decisions in this project, or will they open this decision to the whole group? On one hand, one could say, no, everyone, we should do it democratically, so every contributor should decide for this project. But I would say it will get then very hard to make any decisions. And I personally, again, this is my personal opinion, I would say that the lead team should make such decisions themselves.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that sounds more practical for sure.
Of course.
We have talked a little bit about our project already. Mostly, we were talking about big team science in general, but do you have specific expectations about this project that we're currently starting?
Yeah, I'm very curious, of course, about the results, and I would assume that it will not replicate everywhere, but I have my speculations. But honestly, I'm more also interested in the implementation of this project and specifically how the stimuli will be created. This is the first time where I'm part of such initiatives, and that's why I'm very much interested. This was also the reason why I joined the project, because I'm curious to see how such stimuli are created, how the translation is created, and yeah, I would assume that the results will be interesting.
Yeah, for sure. Well, we have one translation team and a stimulus team, so I'm sure we'll get to speak to them at some point. And then something else that's of course happening is that we're in the process of selecting other studies to replicate as part of this project. And so I'm part of a group that's doing that. And I think that'll also be interesting because then you could say, well, does the pattern for this study, this paradigm, look different than for another paradigm? And is that other paradigm maybe more suited to test a hypothesis or something like that?
Yeah, and this is something that big team science offers everyone as well, that if the group is already formed, it would be quite a waste of resources to just focus it on one project. And that's why I'm also so interested in follow-ups and in other investigations, because you have these resources, you have this infrastructure that you created, and this is the hardest part. So then we should use it for follow-up questions as well.
What I forgot to ask you is, okay, so with all this organizational stuff, isn't it easy for the theoretical question to sort of disappear under the carpet or something like that, because you're so involved in organizing and not thinking about the big picture?
Yeah, I think it's also good if you have someone on the team who is really focusing on the theoretical question and that there are no deviations and everything is clear. So, for example, on our paper with David and with Mahmoud, David was kind of the driving force and always said, okay, we need to remember what we are writing about. And I think, yes, it's hard. You need people who are more like doing something and other who are thinking about the project, and it's better when they're separated. But also another challenge is once you get the results, you probably have also experts, or even during when you're implementing the study, you will receive suggestions from your collaborators that might be very interesting and also fitting to the topic, but maybe not in line with what you had in mind. And it's also hard to say, no, I'm sorry, it sounds interesting, but we do not want to deviate from this. And I think this is the hardest part, that you don't go too broad and still have this focus in mind.
Yeah, it's kind of heartening to see how many people want to be involved in different aspects of the project.
Yeah, of course, there really, my hardest part for me, it was in one project, I was afraid that no one would give an input and I kind of would be left alone. But it was a completely different experience because everyone provided suggestions for this research project, and I needed to say, no, please stop giving me great ideas. We have to do it this way. Yeah.
People are much more sort of interested in participating than you might think. You might think, oh, somebody thinks I'm just going to collect some data and that's it. But at the same time, that could be a challenge if you don't manage it well. So it's a balancing act between being accommodating,
yes,
but also keeping your eye on the ball.
Yeah, and especially that you don't want to also to upset people, and you need to it's hard to make sure that people understand that you value their expertise, their ideas. It's just not possible from a practical point of view. And also, I think that it's great. Also, I know you will be having an episode on this, but everyone who is not the lead team or senior author, they are somewhere in the middle. So it's not about credits, not about citations, but it's more really of shaping this research project together. And I think this is incredible as well.
Well, you kind of expect that if this leads to a publication, it will be very well cited, but that's not really why we're doing this. We're doing, at least for me, it's answering this fundamental question. And as you then form this larger team, also about getting all these great minds together to produce something that goes well and true beyond everything that has been done before on this topic.
Yeah, and I must say, I started my first big team science project was during my PhD, my first year of PhD, and COVID, there were lockdowns, so I couldn't really meet new people, and these initiatives allowed me to really to know so many incredible researchers. I learned so much from them. We are now still in contact and doing projects together. So the community is amazing, and being part of this is something so valuable to me, and I think it's a great opportunity for many who are interested in such projects. Yeah.
So far, we've been talking about big team science in fairly general terms, how these projects are organized, what makes them work or not work. We did touch on one question that I now want to explore a little bit further. People take on different roles, they contribute in different ways, and that raises the question I want to talk about. How do you recognize these contributions? And that's the topic of the next interview, and I'll let the guest introduce himself.
My name is Bjørn Sætrevik. I'm a professor of psychology here at the University of Bergen in Norway. And my research is mostly within cognitive psychology and applied psychology. And I've been looking at decision-making in various forms and various aspects of that, sometimes in pretty basic research, so looking at fundamental mechanisms in neuroscience, for example, but also up to more applied settings during the pandemic and in work in organizational psychology. So how decisions and evaluations and judgments are made in both for individuals, but also in small teams and in work settings and maritime industry and energy sectors and so on.
So that's a really broad range of interests, and they touch a little bit on the topic of our replication project, but what made you interested in this particular study that we are going to replicate?
Well, in general, I'm quite enthusiastic about this approach of large teams and doing replications, maybe some direct replications, but also with some constructive elements. And it's quite a change from the way I was trained to do my research early on, and how we did it in small teams and small samples, and basically just coming up with a reasonable paradigm on our own and making our best approach. And sometimes we would succeed, and sometimes we would not, and sometimes we would get attention for our results, and sometimes we didn't. So I think like a concerted effort of collaborating and spending some time in preparing a paradigm and making sure we do our best in designing the study, I think that's more fruitful and has better prospects. And although it means that we get maybe a smaller role, each of us, in the project, and we get fewer publications out of it, but hopefully those would be more impactful studies, and we would resolve the issues to a larger extent rather than a lot of small studies pointing in different directions.
So it's let's say the size of the project, and that appeals to you because of the potential impact that it might have on the field.
Yeah.
But you also touched on an issue that I wanted to explore with you, because you've done a lot of thinking about this, and that's how then, when you work in a large team, how do you assign credit? It's already a little bit touchy sometimes with a small group of authors. Who's the first author? Who's the last author? And so forth. So do you think the problem just remains the same but gets a little bit bigger with the larger group, or the problem becomes qualitatively different?
Yeah, I think you're right. I think both of those aspects will have an impact. as you were saying, I think we all have experiences with small teams. We all have an impression of how much we've contributed, and maybe we'll make some evaluations as we go along. How much time am I going to spend on this? What do I think it's gonna, what's my investment going to be? What are the others' investments going to be? And how is that going to be reflected in, typically the author list is an important thing. So authorship credits are like one of the main economies in research in our fields. So making sure for the first place, that you make sure who are the authors and who's the first author. And in our field, typically the authorship order is also important. And sometimes also the last author and the first author are the important ones. So it's already a problematic field in small teams.
That's right.
And when you increase the number of authors, it's the problem increases. There's more people to keep track of, and more people to order somewhere. But it also, as you were hinting at, it also adds another dimension, that when the teams grow, it's also much more difficult to keep track of them. And there could also be collaborative issues. And it's also, on the other hand, it's also like a risk of free riders, that you sign up for a project and then maybe you can't, or you're not able to, or you're not willing to invest as much time as you originally planned, but you will still, in some cases, get more credit maybe than your actual contributions should justify. So it is. Both of them, both qualitative and quantitatively different in larger projects, I think.
Yeah, and so I think those are really important points, and there are a couple of issues that I was thinking of. One is from the perspective of a contributor to a project. How do you prevent situations where they feel what I'm doing here doesn't really count, what I've done? My part of the project is really very, very minor. So that's one issue. And then the other issue is the tension between being inclusive and maintaining these meaningful authorships. So, you want to make sure everybody participates, but you also want to make sure they're doing something meaningful.
Yeah. I mean, it is difficult, and getting more difficult as the team grows. And I think as a team leader or a core group of leaders, it is quite, maybe impossible to keep a precise track of 100 authors, or any time you go above 10 or 12 authors, I think there will be some inaccuracies there. So there are different approaches to it, different suggestions, different modes of doing it. In some cases, you try to put up different tiers of authors, so you know for sure who the handful is who have contributed most and maybe should be listed first, and maybe as the last author. But then there will inevitably be some groups of authors which will be difficult to differentiate. And sometimes you put like maybe some categories, some tiers, where you just say, oh, these authors are just alphabetically or randomly ordered. So I'm not really differentiating there, but I'm saying these are qualitatively different from this other group. Mm-hmm. So some sort of arrangement like that is typically necessary.
Related to that, is there then a point at which there's just an embarrassment of riches? We have too many authors. Do you think that's a possibility, or is there always a role for somebody on a project?
Do you mean if you get that you get more collaborators than is useful for the research? Yeah. I mean, sure, that can happen. Typically, you do recruit them for some reason. So in a lot of cases, you want data collection from a lot of sites, and you need at least some collaborators from every site. And you're just happy to get more collaborators on the data collection typically. But the problems often come when you're trying to write the manuscript, or to hash out some study design details. If you get a lot of impact on that stage, it might be more than what is useful for the project. So sometimes you may also want to restrict collaborators on some of those issues. So some of the cases you may assign specific roles. So you say we're looking for collaborators for collecting data, but we may not be looking for more collaborators for writing the paper. Or you might say that we want collaborators to read through and approve the version, but we don't really want people to move paragraph texts around at this stage, and you may need to set some ground rules for what sort of contributions you're looking for.
So what you're saying is we basically need some control over who contributes to what, and some areas require lots of people to contribute, but others don't afford many contributors because we'd be in each other's way, basically.
Yeah, in some cases, like a division of the work like that can be useful. We should also be careful not to shut out contributors. So some contributors may be recruited as mainly a data collector, but may have opportunities to contribute to other aspects. And it would also be so allowing some flexibility for people to come in and contribute in other areas where they can be helpful. But yeah, it is also an issue of how to organize the work and not be overwhelmed as a project leader with too many contributions on too many different aspects. But I think an important thing here is transparency, to making sure that people know what they're being recruited as and what they're expected to contribute, and where they may not be able to contribute, for example, if you want to restrict it like that. So being clear from the outset, people do not expect to be active editors of the manuscript if you're not prepared to have too many authors involved in the editing. So you might see that you can expect to be an author based on your data collection, but we have a core group of manuscript editors, and we're currently not recruiting more manuscript editors, for example. Would be a nice way of making that clear from the beginning.
Oh, but if we step back from our project and more generally, do you think that this issue of credit in these large projects, does it make us think about authorship more differently altogether?
Yeah, that's a good point. Traditionally, the first authorship has been really important, and maybe, for example, for a PhD candidate, they had to, in our system in Norway, a PhD candidate has to have 3 first author papers to get their diploma, to do their PhD defense. And that, if we keep a system like that, it maybe encourages us to run small individual projects where we can be certain we get first authorship, but it might be more difficult to get impactful findings. And if we keep a system like that, and also for assigning promotion and grants and so on, that sort of incentive system may drive us towards having a lot of small studies in every field that might have conflicting findings pointing in different directions, and it would discourage the kind of large, big team science project that we may need to resolve some of the issues we have in research.
So what you're saying basically is that there is a tension between what's good for the field and what's good for the individual in our current system.
Yeah, definitely. So there is a tension, and probably it would be good to show to demonstrate skill in both kinds of work. Being able to contribute in a large team is also a skill. So it's also something we should evaluate, and it could be also maybe even more important in your future career than just being able to sit alone in the lab and write a brilliant paper single-handedly. But we need to evaluate both kinds of skills, and I think a system that only evaluates on first authorship is unfortunate. So we need to find some balance between the two. I think with contribution taxonomies such as credit, we can also think of it a bit differently. So we can think about developing skills in different tasks that are important in research. So I think by doing that, we can evaluate researchers differently for hiring or for qualifying for positions. So you can sort of make a more specialized skill set as a researcher. So you can show that you've been involved, for example, in the analysis aspect of a lot of different projects. You can use that to demonstrate you're a skilled analyst, or another researcher can demonstrate they're very skilled at manuscript writing or at study design.
Yeah, so you're building up a sort of very specific profile for yourself as a researcher, as an analyst or a writer or whatever.
Yeah. You can also show that you have a wide skill set.
What becomes clear in these conversations is that once a project grows, the challenges shift. We're no longer just designing a good experiment, even though that remains at the heart of the project, but we're also coordinating people, distributing responsibility, and making sure everybody can make a contribution and is recognized for it. In the interview with Katja, it became clear how important intercultural communication is, and how we need to be accepting of different styles of interacting and different views. You can read more about this in the paper that Katja co-authored, which is listed in the show notes. In the interview with Bjørn, it was nice to see how assuming specific roles in large projects and being recognized for them allows researchers to build up a portfolio. Very much related to this topic, Bjørn and his colleagues have co-authored a paper called Planning an Agreement for Collaborative Teams. It's also listed in the show notes. And before we close, a quick correction. In the previous episode, in the conversation with Anita, we said that there was a 3-week delay in the original study by Loftus and Palmer between people watching the video and the memory test. But as a listener pointed out, that wasn't quite right. We misspoke or misremembered. It was 1 week. Now, if you know others who might be interested, students, seasoned researchers, or simply curious listeners, feel free to share the podcast with them. And if you haven't already, you can subscribe to Research as It Happens, so you can follow how this project develops, step by step.